Hey guys, in this video I'm going to share with you how to solve one of the advanced exercises of UiPath using REFramework. So the exercise name is Calculate Client Security Hash, and I was able to solve this exercise before, but there's a lot of update and changes with UiPath since then. So right now, year 2021, I decided to try this exercise again, but this time I will be using Google Chrome as my browser and we will try to discover new approach, and I will try to complete this exercise in just one video so you will not get lost, and also I will explain every step of the process as detailed as much as possible. So once you completed this project, you should have this all component of calculate client security hash completed in your UiPath Academy, and that is our goal for you. So before we get started, I would like to show you first the complete project so that you'll get an idea of what are we going to build and how it is going to work. So let me run this first, but before I forget, as a final requirement, before you continue with this video, make sure that you have the UiPath Studio installed in your machine, and at the same time make sure that you have your Orchestrator set up. Okay, so I will run the project using run. Once the project started, it will navigate to System 1 application and log in using its credential, and then go to work item and then extract all this item. And then this item will be filtered because we just only need those item under WI5 type. As you can see on this port, there is a type column. And once all the item has been extracted, it will log out from System 1 application and close the browser as well. And then after that, it will open the same application, the system one, and again log in using the credential assigned to it. And then it will open SHA-1 application as well. And then based on the extracted work items on the previous process, it will process each work items and get the client information and hash that information, and then add to the comment section of the work item the hash result and flag the status as completed, hit the update work item, and proceed to the next item. So basically, that is what this project is going to do on all the work items captured or retrieved or extracted from the first part of the process. So the process will be the same for each item, and it will only stop until all the work item under WI5 has been completed. And once all the item has been processed, it will close the System 1 application as well as the SHA-1 application. So in this example, it was able to process all the WI5 items. And to verify if the process was successful, if you go to Acme System and Work Items, you should be able to see all the WI5 items that are tagged as completed. So this is page 2, page 3. There's no WI5 here. Let's check the last page. No WI5. Page 12, yeah, it's completed. Let's check this last one. And yes, there's also WI5 here tag as completed. So it's just a pretty simple, right? So I guess we can now start with how to build this project for exercise. Alright, once you open the UiPath Studio, and from this page, make sure to select Robotic Enterprise Framework or IRE Framework. And once this pop-up show up, make sure to name it Calculate Client Security Hash. I'll label it 2021 and make sure to select the location you prepare. So I'm gonna save that to my D drive and this folder. And it's a good practice to always put a description. So I'll just put here calculate client sec security hash. And again, I will be using Google Chrome browser. and then hit create. Okay, so by the way guys, I am following the walkthrough hints that I downloaded from Academy. I believe this is the same PDF file that you are using as a guide, so we will follow this guide for the rest of this exercise. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do here is we need to open the configuration file. So to do that, you need to click this File Explorer folder and then go to Data folder and open this config Excel file. And then from here, we'll go to Setting. And then since we will not be using Orchestrator queue on this exercise, we can delete this two rows. We will not be using those. And then from here, we need to add two settings. First one is the system1 URL, and the second one is the SHA-1 online URL. And then we also need to add another setting for the system1 credential. Right, so before we go into system1 credential, let's just get the two URL. So the first one is the acme-test.uipath.com and the other one is the SHA-1 online. If you don't have this URL yet, you can just search them from Google. So here I will be needing this. Do not include the login word. So that should be the value of system1 URL setting. And then the other one is shawanonline.com, and that's for Shawan online URL. So the next step is we need to go to our orchestrator to create an asset for the system1 credential. So to do that, I'm gonna open my orchestrator. If you don't know the link, that's platform.uipath.com. So from this page, just click this default tenant if that's the same name that you have. Could be different one. So it will direct you to the orchestrator. I would advise that you bookmark this link so that if you need to go back to this page, you just need to click that bookmark page. So from here, go to your My Workspace and then go to Asset tab. Alright, so from this page, just click this Add button and then Add, and then asset name, we will name it Acme Credential or anything you want, but I think Acme Credential is the best name for that. And let's select credential for the type. And then now let's store the credential. This is the credential for the Acme system. So before you start using this application, make sure that you have registered on here. So just click that register button from the home page. And then here you need to provide your email address. And this is a critical part, guys. Make sure that the email address you will put in here is the same with the email address that you use in UiPath Academy, because those two are connected, especially in the part where UiPath will check your project. So make sure again that the email address you will use here is the same as the email address that you use in the UiPath Academy. So if you don't have an account yet from this system, make sure to register first. Since I already have one, I will just put that in here. Right, and then hit create, and then I'm gonna copy this name and go back to my configuration file, and that should be the value of my system1 credential setting. Make sure to save, and now we will switch to constant page, and from here we need to modify the value of max retry number from 0 to 2. All right, so once you have that all placed or set up, let's not close it for the meantime. Let's just make sure to save everything that we update. So now we can go back to Studio. And from here, the next step is we need to change the transaction item variable type from QItem into data row, because again, in this exercise, we will be dealing with data row. So to do that, make sure to open your main.xaml file. We need to change it from this uh, part of the project. Again, main.xaml. And once you're here, make sure to click on this space, not on the activity. Make sure in this space, and you will see that this box will be highlighted. And then from here, go to variables and look for the transaction item. That's the first one on my list. I think it's the same with yours. Again, if you're not showing anything on this variable panel, just make sure to click here, and all the variable or all the general business process variable should show up in here. And then look for transaction item and make sure to change the variable type into data row. So if that's not available on the option, just browse for types and then type in here the data row and look for this one, right? So once done, we can now close the variable tab, and you will see we got now errors. And yeah, that's what I'm here for you. I'm here to help you fix that. So let's start with GetTransactionData scope. So just double click inside this activity. So let's start with this part. Okay, so you can see there's an error in this sequence, and it's specific to this activity. So to fix this, you just need to delete the value, click outside the activity, and then go back and type nothing again, and then click outside. That should be fixed. And here again, there's an error with this sequence and with this activity. So let's check import argument. Now you can see here that it's the problem with this mapping. It is because we changed transaction item into data row, and we are passing the value into a variable that has a different variable type, which is QItem. So to fix this, we need to change the variable type of this variable inside the GetTransactionData workflow. So to do that, let's cancel this part first, and then let's open this workflow. I hope you don't get confused in here. So what happened after I click open workflow, it opened the get transaction data. So from here, go to argument tab and look for the transaction item. It's out underscore transaction item in here. Make sure to change this into data row as well. And close that and save. Also, since we are not working with Orchestrator queue, we can now remove this activity. We don't need this anymore. So just delete that, and again make sure to save. So let's close this activity now. Now we're back here. Now if you click import argument, you'll see that transaction was gone. So we need to map it again. Transaction item, right? And hit OK. And as you can see, we still have an error on this sequence. So maybe that's in the catch or finally. So let's check this part. Alright, in the exception part, just click exception, and then here, let's remove this value, click outside the activity and set it to nothing again, and then click outside the activity, and that should be fixed. And as you can see, we're clear on this part. There's no more error in this sequence. So let's just save it, and then let's go back to main by clicking on this link. And then we have another error in the process transaction scope. So let's go inside that scope. And again, this is how you look at the error. Here it shows that there is a problem with the sequence, and it's pointing with this activity. So let's click import argument. Now let's see that there's another variable with a different type, queue item. So we need to fix this again. So cancel that and open the workflow again. And here, go to arguments and look for transaction item. We need to change that to transaction, sorry, data row type. Close that and make sure to save. And now let's go back to main and import again. And now let's assign transaction item variable again. And that should fix that issue. But still, there's an error within this sequence. Let's see where is the other one. It's not in the business rule exception. Okay, maybe in finally. Yep, click finally. And then inside the try, you will see there's a problem with set transaction status because again, there's another transaction item with queue item type. So let's open the workflow and then go to arguments and then look for transaction item and again change that into data row. Close that argument tab and you'll see we had another error since we're not working with queue again as I repeatedly mentioning we will not be needing these three items here so we can just delete them and then we need to connect this here and I think here as well. So this part increment the transaction number so that if we have 10 items to process, this part is important to increment the loop. Okay, so once you made the changes, hit the save button and let's close this sequence. Now we'll go back to import and you see here transaction item is set to nothing. Let's set that to transaction item and we don't have any errors anymore. So make sure to save. Now let's go back to main and to ensure that we don't have any errors so far, go to analyze file and click validate project. And as you can see here on the left or on the right panel of my screen, error list, there's no error found. So we should be good to continue with the next step. So the next step is we need to create two new folders. So to do that, again, click the File Explorer button here on the project panel. Click that, and now let's create new folder. First one is the system one, and the second one is the SHA-1 online. Oh, sorry, it's not one line, it should be online. Let me just try that again. Always put one line. Okay, so make sure to create these two folder. We will be needing those two on the following step. And then, okay, now we need to create our first sequence. So to create a new sequence, just go here at new and then select sequence. And then we will name this sequence system1 login. And then before you hit create, make sure to select the system1 folder, which is the folder we just created. So look for system1, select that folder, and then hit create. And if you can see here on the project funnel, there is the system1 and SHA-1 folder, and now in system1 we have now a new sequence name system1 login. So the first thing that we need to do in this sequence is to create two in argument. So the first one is the system1 URL and the next one is the system1 credential. Okay, the next thing is we need to invoke, and again these two arguments should be in direction and both are with string argument type. Let's close that. The next step is to invoke GetAppCredential workflow. Before, when I started working on this exercise, GetAppCredential is automatically part of the framework folder, but I see on the latest update it's no longer part. But don't worry, that's not a problem. We can Google that XAML file. So to do that, go to your browser, go to Google, and then type in get app credential UiPath, and it should show you something where you
should give you a GitHub link. Maybe we can try this one. So let's look for a GitHub link where we can download that what do you call that, flow workflow. So here we can check this link. Okay, what did I click? Let me go back. I thought that's a GitHub link. Okay, there's a GitHub link in here. Open link in new tab. And yep, it's a GitHub link. And now you can see the get app credential in here. So click that. And if you don't have a GitHub account, don't worry because I think before you can download it, you need to sign in first. But we can just copy this whole SAML code. So make sure to copy that. I think Control A will work as well. And then copy. And then what you can do is open a notepad and paste the code in here. And then save as. Alright. And then look for our project. So this is the project I am currently working on right now. And look for the framework folder. It should be inside the framework folder. And now let's save it as GetAppCredential.xaml. I enclose it into double quote so that this file will be created as XAML. So once you do that, just click the save button. Now I'm gonna close this notepad file and go back to my studio. And now once I refresh this, I have now the GetApp credential added as part of my framework folder. So I hope you do the same. It's just a simple step. So once you have it available, another step is to add a package name that is related to credential. So to do that, you need to click Manage Packages because we need to have the credential package or added in these dependencies. So click Manage Package and then go to All Packages and look for Credential. It should be the UiPath Credentials.activities. So install whatever latest version you have in there. Once you click install, hit the save button. Right, as you can see on my screen, I have now the credentials activity added as part of my dependencies. Now we can invoke the GetApp credential on our project. So there are two ways to invoke workflow or SAML file. The first option is to use invoke activity from the activity tab, but I would suggest using the drag approach. It's much easier for me. So from here, just drag GetApp credential. And this workflow has an argument, three total of three arguments. So we need to supply this argument. So right now we have the IN credential. That's one of the argument that we created earlier. So we need to map that in here. That's the system one credential. Okay, again, where did I get this one? We created that earlier from here. That's the system one credential. I just map it. And then we need to create a variable for our username and password. So in UiPath, there's an easy way to do that. I mean, creating variable directly. So just go here, press Control K from your keyboard, and then I will name the variable username. And then for the password, again, press Control K on your keyboard and name it password. So one advantage of doing this is that the variable type will be the correct variable type will be automatically assigned to this variable. So once you hit OK, you should be able to find those variable in your variable tab and with the right variable type. Right? Okay, so I think before we proceed further, let's just check first if we are able to connect to our orchestrator asset. So let me just close these two tabs. Let's see if we can connect and retrieve the value of this asset we created earlier. So to do that, we need to provide first a default value in here. So I will copy this and paste that on the credential value. It should be enclosed with a double quote. And now I want to print by a message box. Here's the message box. The username. Okay, so let's save it and now let's test it. I will test it using run file. Make sure to select run file when testing a single workflow. So it's running and it was able to retrieve my email. So this workflow is working. So let me down delete that and let's continue with the next step. The next step is to, okay, continue the login part or the system one login. Let me close this two page as well. And now the next activity we need to add is open browser because we need to navigate the system one application. So drag that in here and we need the system one URL in here. And again, as I mentioned in my introduction, we will be using Google Chrome browser in this activity or exercise. So make sure to select Chrome in your browser type. I hope you select Chrome because again, I will be using Chrome on the rest of this exercise. So before we proceed further, let me just test this first part, but we need to have a default value for system1 URL first. So we can get that from our setting of or from our config data and setting. Just copy this value. And for the meantime, let's assign it as a default value. And now save and let's test this. Go to run file. Alright, I believe it's working. Let's check my Chrome. Yep, it opened system one, and again, it's a Chrome browser. So the next thing is we need to maximize the page once it opened that page, and then we need to start with typing in the username and password in here, and then click the button. So let's start with the email. Let's look for type into activity on your activity panel, and then select this. And then we need to indicate the email element and we need to assign here the username. But before we proceed, I want to make sure that the selector is good. So it's a good practice that you always check the selector of every activity, especially when you are working with web automation. So you just need to expand the target and then it's this more option. And as I can see, the selector is good. Actually, you can also validate that by clicking this. If it goes to green, it's good. And also you can use this highlight button in here. So you can ensure that it's pointing to the correct element. So once that is good, just hit OK. And I think it's also good practice to, modify the label. So the next thing we need is the type secure text activity for the password. So we are using a different activity for password because it's a confidential activity. We cannot use type into another thing. The password variable is a secure string. So type into activity will not allow to use this variable. So we'll be using type secure text on this one. And let me modify this type password. So let's indicate the password field and now in secure text property, just provide the password. And let me also validate the selector of this one. And I think it's good. it's all right. So hit OK once you do that, and then the next thing is we need to click the login button. So look for the click activity. Let's modify the title and indicate it login. And before I forgot, going back to type into email, make sure to enable simulate type as well as an password. So what simulate type is that it allows the program to type into the application even if it's in the background. You know, if you have multiple pages or multiple screen in your desktop, even if the Acme's page is on the background, the program will still be able to write the username or password in that application. So now going back to click login, let me validate the selector first. And I think this one is good, so hit OK. And we also need to activate simulate click property. It should be set to true. So once you click login, let's test this first. We make sure that you have a default value. We need to remove that later, but for the meantime, since we're testing this activity, let's check. I will test this sequence again using run file. And before you do that, make sure to close the Acme page. Now let's try run file. Okay, what happened? Let's check. Okay, it was able to log in successfully. So the next step is we need to check or validate if the login is successful or not. So as mentioned on the guide, we will be using a pattern to do that. So we will be using this dashboard. Using the next activity, which is element exists. So go to your activity panel, look for element exists activity. Element exists, where's element exists? This one. Make sure that's the one under UI automation and drag that in here. And here we need to indicate the dashboard pattern. So, so from here, let's check the selector first. And now it's not a good selector for me. So what we can do is click this open in UI Explorer link, and then we will have an option to build a better selector than that. So as you can see, there are unselected attributes in this side. I think we can select AA name, so it will be added automatically in this page. And what else? I think we can also add the page header as well as the inner text. So this is now the new selector. I will hit save, and yep, I think this is a better one. And let's validate it as well. Yep, now hit OK once you do that. And here we need to provide an output exists attribute. So I will just create the variable directly from here by pressing Ctrl K. And then I will name the variable login success. So what will happen is that if the program see this pattern, it will set the login success variable into true. And if not, it will be set to false. So if it's true, we can validate or we can say that the login is successful. So now let's add the next activity, which is the if activity. So let's drag that here and let's say login success and let's click show else. So if login is success, I think it's also a good practice to start utilizing the activity name log message. Later I will show you how important this is. So if login is success, we'll put or we'll have a log message, an info log level, and let's say Acme login success or system 1 login success, whatever you prepared. And if it failed, we can also put another message in here, but this one is an error message. And let's say Acme login failed, so we know what happened. And we will also throw an exception if it failed. So I'll just give you an example, but we're not utilizing this one on this exercise. So this is how you create an exception or throw exception. I will just say business rule exception, Acme login failed. Later I will show you that if you will encounter the failed login issue. And if you will check the guide, there's also a send email activity that should be triggered if the login is failed, but I guess that's not too critical for this exercise. Well, actually, just to be honest with you, even if you don't add that, you can pass this exercise, and send email is another thing. But if we still have time, I will try to include that activity as well. But for now, we should be good on this one. So let's hit the save button. Again, let's test our project, but make sure to log out from the Acme System 1 page first. Wait for the log out. Okay, wait for the screen when you log out and then close the browser. Now let's test this using run file again. Right, so process is completed, and now you can see that here there is a log message Acme login success. It's actually a good practice to utilize the log message so that you will see what's happening here. Alright, so I think this is all that we need for this sequence. So before we leave this sequence, make sure to remove the default value that we use. Alright, and save it. Now we'll go to the next step. Let's close this one first. Okay, so the next step is we need to create a sequence that will lag out to system one application. So let's do that. Hit new again, select sequence, and then let's name this sequence system one close, and make sure to select the system one folder before you hit the create button. Right, from here, the first activity that we need to add is attach browser, but as mentioned on the guide, I just saw it. It's a good practice to always add annotation. So if you don't know how to do that, just right click from the sequence, go to annotation and add annotation. Let's say it will close system one application, and you can also include other description or text that you want. And let's pin that. So that's how to pin an annotation. Now let's add the first activity for this sequence. Look for the attached browser, right? Drag that in your application. Now we need to indicate the system one page. So click on this. And now let's validate the selector. Make sure the browser type selected is Chrome. And let's check the selector. I think this is a good one, but as a good advice for you guys, um, this close sequence may be called from different part of the applications, like maybe it will close the application when you are in the work items page. And one thing you can notice is that the application title is keep on changing. So when you are on the main page, it shows Acme System 1 dash dashboard. When you go inside the work item, it will show dash work items. So I hope you see the difference. So we need to have our code flexible with that situation. So to do that, we can remove this dashboard word in here, and instead we can replace it with a wildcard. So even if the page is dash work items, you can see if I click validate here, it's still validated. If we click highlight, it was still able to adapt or point to that screen. Now let me also try to go back to the dashboard page, and let's try to validate again, and still it's working. Yep, still pointing correctly to that page. So now we can now save this. And the next step is we need to click the logout link. So to do that, let's add a click activity. So drag that in here and indicate that. Click lag out. Let me modify this title first. Click lag out. And let's validate the selector. Again, this is a good practice. I think we should remove this parent ID. I don't like that one. Let's open UI Explorer again. And from here, we can unselect parent ID. I think we can also use the inner text. And yeah, I think that should be good. Let's validate here. Yeah, it's working. Let's also validate from here. Yep, it's pointing to that element. So we can now hit OK and make sure to enable simulate click. Alright, so once you click the lag out button, we need to close the tab or the browser tab. But when I was working with this exercise, I think it's also a good practice that when you click lag out, you need to wait for it for this page first before we can tell that the logout is successful. It's not part of the guide, but I think it's a good practice to include this. So in order to make sure that the logout is successful, what we're going to do is we'll look for a pattern like this header or maybe this text box, and once those exist, we can tell that the logout is successful before we close the tab. So to do that, let's remove the close tab activity first, and then let's add another element exist in here. Drag that in here, and now let's indicate a pattern. You can select a different pattern, but I think we can use the login pattern. So validate lag out. I will change the activity title, and now let's check the selector. Okay, it's not a good selector again, so let's open UI Explorer and let's build a better selector. So we can use the AA name, which is the login, and class page header as well, and we can also include the inner text plugin. Now let's hit the save button. It's validating good. Now let's try to highlight, and yep, it's pointing to the correct element. Now let's hit OK, and let's put an output exists variable in here. I will create a new variable for that, and I will name it logout success. Hit enter, and now let's validate that variable. So let's add an if here, add that here, and then let's say if logout success, let's show else. Let's log a message, info message here, acme logout success. And after that, that's the time that we will close the tab once we ensure that the logout is successful. We can also add a lag message in the else statement to tell that the acme logout failed. Hopefully we don't encounter this message. So I think that's all that we need for this activity. We don't have argument in here. Let me save this one first and let's test it. So before we can test it, we need to be logged in on the application first. So I will just manually log in. Make sure that you have the Acme credential handy so that when you need to manually log in, you can just easily do that. So now from this page, I will run this sequence using run file. As you can see, what we did is effective. It wait for the login page to show up first before it close the tab. Because before when I'm testing this exercise, there are a lot of instances that it closed the tab even if the logout is not completed yet. So what happened is that when you launch the page and it's expecting to log in, it's not working because it's already logged in. It will not be able to find the element for email and password. So I hope you're getting what I'm saying here, but if not, maybe I can better explain that later. So again, make sure to save this sequence. Now let's close that one and let's proceed to the next step. So the next thing is we need to work with the SHA-1 application. So let's add a new sequence. Let's name this one SHA-1 open and make sure to save that inside the SHA-1 online folder before you hit the create button. And from here you can start with an annotation, but I will start with open browser, the same thing that we use or we did with login, Acme login. I forgot we need two argument or one argument in here. So that's the SHA-1 URL. So we need to put here SHA-1 URL. And the only thing we need to do once we open that page is to maximize it. So look for maximize activity and drag that inside the do part of this open browser. And in the open browser, make sure to select Google Chrome again before you forgot. Right, so we can test this one now, but we need to provide a default value first. So let's go to our config file and copy the SHA-1 URL and enclose that with a quote because it's a string. And now let's test it. Okay, yep, it opened the page successfully. So that's pretty simple for this part. That's all that we need for this one. So before we save it, make sure to remove the default value, save it, and now we can close that one. The next thing is we need to have a sequence that close the SHA-1 application. So click new and sequence, and then let's name this one SHA-1 close. And make sure to select the SHA-1 online folder before you hit the create sequence button. And from here, we need to start with attach browser. We need to attach this page first. Look for the attach browser activity. And then we need to indicate the SHA-1 page. Okay, let's validate the selector. I think this is good. And after that, we just need to add a close tab activity in here. And I think that's all that we need from this sequence. Now we can test it. We don't need any argument on this one, so it's just a simple sequence. Just run file and it closed the SHA-1 application. Right, make sure to save that and close this sequence. Now let's move on. We need to go to InitAllApplication part. So if you are on the main workflow, this is the you need to go inside initialization scope. So double click from here. And then we need, oh sorry, I was wrong. Forgot what I said. Go back to main and go to your project tab. Now we need to look for InitAllApplication.xaml file. So this is that one. You need to double click in this to open that sequence. So from here we need to invoke those sequence that we just created earlier, starting with the system1 login. So just expand the system1 folder and drag the system1 login in here. And you can see it requires arguments, so we need to provide those. Oh, I think I forgot to remove the default value for system1. So before I continue with this one, let me just open system1 again. System1 login. And I need to make sure that the default value is removed. Now I can save it again. Let's close system1 login. And going back in here, there should be no default value in here because we need to provide those. So to do that, we need to use this name from the config file. So system1.url, and we'll say inconfig system1 URL that to string. So this is the way where we capture the value of our config file name system1 URL and pass it to this variable. The next thing is the system1 credential. So copy that name and then assign that in here. Assign config that system1 credential dot to string. So I hope that is clear. Hit OK after that. And then the next thing is we need to invoke this SHA-1 open sequence. So just expand SHA-1 online folder and drag SHA-1 open. Here it also require an argument. So we need to get the name and go back and let's say here inconfig dot SHA-1 online dot to string and hit OK. Right, so that's all that we need to do in this sequence. The next step is, let me close this one first. Look for the close all application. It's also under or within the framework folder. So activate that one. In here, we just need to drag the system1.close and SHA-1 underscore close. So let's start with system1. There's no need to provide an argument. Same with the SHA-1 underscore close. Again, make sure you are in close all application sequence before you drag these two and save it. And then the next step is kill all process. So look for kill all process sequence. It's again within the framework folder. Activate that. And here we just need to add an activity name kill process. Drag that to our sequence and we just need to provide a process name in here. Since we are working with the Chrome browser, just put Chrome in here. But just in case you use IE, because that's what you want, you need to put here iExplorer. Yeah, iExplorer as mentioned on the guideline. Alright, so once you do that, just hit the save button and that's all we need to do in this sequence. The next step is we need to create a blank sequence that will navigate to work item in the system1 application. So to do that, we need to create a new sequence and let's name it system1 navigate to work items. And make sure to select the system1 folder before you hit the create button. Alright, so from this page, we need to click the navigate to work item, but since I don't have the application open, let me just open it manually and log in manually. That's why I am recommending to have your credential handy so that if you need to manually log in, you can easily do it. Alright, so here on the new sequence, we just need to click the work items button. So we'll just need to add a click activity in here and drag that to our sequence and indicate the work items button. So let's change it to work items and let's validate the selector. Let's make sure it's a good one. I think we can improve it. So let's open UI Explorer. So I hope you're getting familiar now with selector. Again, when you are dealing with web automation, selector is your best friend. Believe me on that. And in here, I think we can remove dash menu and we can use type and inner text as well. And I think those are the better attributes that we can use. And let's save that. It's validating good. Let's try to highlight and it's pointing to the right element. So we should be good on this one. So hit OK. And yeah, also activate simulate click. Now let's save it. And that's all that we need for this sequence. So let me just check the next step. Okay, so the next step is we need to extract these items under work items page. So if you have 12 pages, it should be able to extract all the item within 12 pages. But now I have 14 pages and before I forgot, Let me just reset my test item because as you could see on my screen, I have some items tag as completed. So again, before you start, make sure to reset your test data by going to user option and then reset test data. Now let me go back to my work items and yeah, I still have 14 items in here. So again, the next goal for the next activity is to extract this item. So let's start creating a new sequence. Hit the new button and then let's name this one System 1 Extract Work Items. And again, as I always mentioning, make sure to select the right folder and then hit the create button. So from this sequence, we need to start with data scraping. So look for this button, data scraping, and let me cancel that first. Make sure that you have this page open before you do the data scraping. Going back to Studio, click data scraping, and then click next, and then click anywhere from the table. It could be a header or a cell, so anything. And then there will be a message box in here asking for this question. Just select yes, and then you need to use 0 for here, and then hit the finish button. And is data spanning to multiple pages? Yes. After you click yes, you need to indicate the next button. So let's just select this one. And that should be it for this. And automatically the work items data will be stored to a data table, extract data table. I don't want to use this variable, so I'm gonna delete that and delete this as well. So here we need to create an out argument. Let's name it, okay, I'm trying to create an argument. Let's name it, oh, I got excited again. Let's, let's name it DT work items. And the argument type should be a data table. If you don't have the data table available in here, just browse for types and look for data table. Alright, now I will assign this extracted value again to that variable, DT work items. And all this error should be gone after that. Yep. Maybe we can modify this label. And before we leave this sequence, let's test it so you'll see what will happen in here. Make sure again that the page is open and you are at page 1. And I, yeah, you can now test it using run file. I just want to see if it's working as I expected, because if you test it, it should be navigating to different pages while extracting the items. So if it's doing the same thing on your screen, then you're doing it right so far. Right, so I think it's working as expected. I'm just waiting for the program to get completed. So you can see here it's not yet finished because there's no indication yet. But if you get bored, you can actually stop it. But let me just wait for it for now. Yep, execution ended. It took 1 minute to scrap my table. Sometimes it's faster, especially if you only have few items or few pages in there. Alright, so now we're good with this activity. We can now save and close this one. Now the next step is we need to go to the main workflow, which is here, and we need to go inside the initialization scope and look for the invoke kill all process. So to find that, once you are on this page, just go inside the first run sequence, double click, and then look for this invoke activity, invoke kill all process. As mentioned on the guide, we need to create a sequence after this one. So you can do that by going into activity and look for the sequence. It's a sequence activity, guys, not there. So make sure to you are in the activity panel. So drag that sequence and let's label it extract work item. Right, so from this page, we need to invoke different workflows, starting with navigate to work items. So let's go to the system one folder. Let's drag that or invoke that workflow so it doesn't require any arguments. And then the next thing is we need to invoke extract work items. And now it requires an argument. So what we can assign or what we can map here is the transaction data variable because it's a data table variable type as well. So just map that here and hit OK. And then the next one is, oh, I forgot. The first sequence that should be included is system1 login. So don't do the same mistake. We need to drag the system1 login first in here before the navigate to work items. And then we need to populate these arguments. So let's start with the system1 URL. So I will be copying this to avoid possible mistake. This time we'll be using config because earlier we used inconfig. Hopefully I can explain that later why it becomes config from inconfig. So the next one is credential and hit OK and you should be good after that. So the login, it will navigate to work items and then extract the work items and then of course close the application by invoking system1 underscore close. Right, make sure that all the arguments are bind properly and correctly. And then the next thing is we need to filter the extracted work items because from this page, what we only need is are the items under the WI5 type. So we don't need the other items under different WI. So we'll just need to filter it again and capture all W5, WI5 items type. So to do that, we need to have an assign activity. So go to activities and assign. And then let's create a new variable. Let's name it WI list. Hit enter. And it should be, let me just expand the value. So I'll type the value from here, not from here, so you will see the formula properly. So it should be transaction data because we assign it to transaction data. That select type should be WI5 and or let's follow the guide. Status is equals to open. So make sure to copy it properly. If you use a different variable on that you map from extract work item, you should use that one as well here. But if you follow the same on mine, then just use transaction data. Once you do that, just hit the OK button. And we got an error because WI list is of type string and it needs to be a data row. So let's look for data row. If that's not available, click browse for types and type in data row. Select that and go back in here. And as you can see, we still have an error. It's saying okay, because data row is just a one-dimensional array and we need to have a variable that's multi-dimensional. So to do that, we just need to select our variable type from data row into an array of data row. So from here, select array of t and look for data row. So it should be now array of data row. If you go back in here, oh, is there still an error? Okay, well, what's the error? Oh, what did I change? I changed the transaction item instead of the WI list. So let me return transaction item into data row, and where was the WI list? WI list should be the one array of data row. So this one. So I mistakenly update the transaction item instead of WI list. So if you did the same mistake, make sure to return transaction item variable type into data row. So this is how it should look like. And another thing, make sure to update the scope of WI list variable into general business process scope, because we need to access this variable later on a different scope. So again, make sure that is set to general business process scope. Now you can close that, and this should be good. Right. So now let's go to get transaction data. So let me go back from the main link, and let's look for get transaction data workflow. It's under or within the framework folder again. Let's activate that one. So let's start with adding an input argument. Well, let's name it INWI list, and make sure that it is an array of data row. So we need to select this, not the data row. Again, it should be the array of data row. Should look like that. And then we need to change the condition here from out transaction number into in transaction number. Should be less than the INWI list that count. Alright, it's less than because when you are dealing with data row, index or the counting always start at 0. It's not starting at 1. So if you have 15 items to process, you will start with 0, and you need to have a condition less than the count, which is 14, so that you will not get an error once it it meets the last item to process within the list. Okay, so make sure to do the same, and then we need to click show else in here, and let's remove this for the meantime. And this should be out transaction item is equals to, I will expand the value again, I will edit it from here. It should be equals to INWI list IN transaction number. Make sure that you spell it correctly. Alright, then hit OK. And then we also need to assign the WI ID to the out transaction ID variable. So let's just drag an assign activity in here. So let's modify this label, and this one is for transaction ID. So let's put here out transaction ID. It's mentioned on the guide, so it should be out transaction item dot, oh no, not that, it's WIID dot to string. So WIID is one of the column in here, so it's pointing to this column. So whatever the value of this column will be assigned to out transaction item. And then this part in here is we are assigning transaction item, which is a data row, whatever the loop number is. So for example, this is the first loop. It is assigning this row, all this row value to the out transaction item variable because it's a data row type of variable. So I hope that is clear to you. Now we need to also put an else statement in here. So let's use assign and let's say out transaction item. When there's no more item to process, we need to set it to nothing. All right, and do we have everything in place? I think yes. So let's save this sequence and close it. Now, before I forget, from the main page, you need to go inside the get transaction data scope, double click in there, and then here on the try get transaction data, expand this try, and then you can see we have now another argument that we need to bind our variable. So that's the I and WI list. So we need to bind that the WI list that we created earlier. That is why we set it up to a general business process scope so we can access it from here and we can map it to our INWI list argument. Hit OK once you do that and click save. So let me just check the guide. What should be the next step? Well, by this time, as mentioned in the guide, you can test it. You can just simply run it from here, but I'll just do that later because you want to complete this as fast as possible. So if you still have more time than me, then you can test it on your side and see if you have any error. But I hope you don't have. But if in case, we can debug that later when I run this program. If you follow me correctly, and if I have an error in the later, then you should have the same. But for now, I'll just continue with the next step. So the next step is we need to process the work items. So we need to create a new sequence. Sequence name is system1. Navigate to work item details. I have an extra I there. And make sure to save it inside the system1 folder. Hit the create button. So at this part, what our goal is to navigate to each WI5 items. So we are expecting to get directed into this page. And as you can notice in the URL, there is a pattern. So we just need to copy this pattern and then just keep on changing the WI ID, which is what we uh, captured earlier, so that we can go directly to each WI5 items. So to do that, we need to start the sequence by adding two arguments. The first one is the WI ID or the work item ID. And based on the guide, it should be of type integer. It's okay, let's just follow it. And then the next one is the system1 URL. It should be of type string. So what we're going to do is to just concatenate the system1 URL and then the work items word as well as the WI ID. Alright, so to start with this sequence, we need to attach the browser from the dashboard page. So we need to be in this page before we, what do you call this? So just drag attach browser and then again make sure that you are on this page before you hit indicate, right? And then let me just check the selector. Yeah, I think it's good. And now the first activity that we need to add inside the do is the navigate to activity. So look for navigate to and then drag that inside the do. And now we need to compose the URL. So again, let me look at the structure. So let's look for WI5. There's no one for each one. Yeah, there's one in here. So we need to build a URL similar to this. So it should be, yep, system1 URL plus, this is how you concatenate in UiPath using the plus, and then work items until the Is this forward slash or backslash? I think that's forward slash, and then the WIID. So we got an error because WIID is of type integer, so we need to convert it to string. We can simply do that by using that to string. So if you don't know what that to string means, it is converting the variable into string data type. So we should be good at this part. Let me see what else do we need to add in here. I think that's all. So before we leave this sequence, let's just test it. So I'll just provide the default value first from the argument. Oh, sorry, I copied the wrong one. Let's copy this. And then let's try to use a different work item ID. Let me grab a new one. I don't know why my Acme system is kind of slow. So let's try page 5. Yeah, there's one. Let's copy this one. Okay, go back to studio, and it's an integer value, so don't enclose it with a double quote, else you will get an error. Now we need to go back to dashboard page and test it. So from here, just run file, and let's see. Yep, we use 9912 and it direct us to 9112. Right, so this one should be good. Let's remove the default value before we save it. And now we can close this one. So the next thing is we need to create a blank sequence that will extract the client information. Okay, the next goal is to extract this information. So let's create a new sequence. Let's name it system1 extract client information, and make sure to save that within the system1 folder as well. Hit the create button, and then for to start with this sequence, we need to add 3 output arguments, starting with the client ID, client name, and of course client country. And make sure that the direction is out, because we will pass those value later outside this sequence, and argument type should be all of type string, right? So we need to start with this page. So let's add an attached browser activity. Make sure that you are inside one of the WI5 item page. Let's start with attached browser and indicate this page. Let's just validate the selector. So it's the only important here is the title. It should be work items. And in this case, any item, we will getting the same page title, so it should be good. Now the next step is we need to use getText to get this client information. Since all this information is just inside one element, which is a paragraph element or P, we need to start capturing the value or inner text of this element first. So we will be using the getText activity. So look for getText activity, drag that in here and indicate the client information. So just here, not this one, it should be just here. And when you are using a getText activity, make sure to always set the wait for ready attributes to complete. And then let's change this to get client. And now let's assign an output value for this. Let's create the variable from here. I will name it client information. It should be a type string. Let me check that. Yep. Right, so after we get the client information, we need to get each value, the client ID, the client name, and the client country. And to do that, we need to use an assign activity. So let's start with client ID. And I will edit the value from here so you will see the complete formula or syntax. It should be client information dot substring and client information dot index of client ID colon space plus client ID colon space dot length and then dot split. Oh, I forgot to add a quote in here. Should be dot split environment dot new line dot to car array of 0. Right. And once you, okay, make sure to copy it exactly as it is. Now, once you copy that, hit OK and make sure that there's no error with that. So before we proceed on the other details, let's test this one first. I will be using write line activity to test it, and I will just print client ID. Oh, sorry, it's not showing. And before we test it, make sure that you are one of the WI5 items page. So let's save that and test this using run file. And you can see as printed in here, it's 0Z56329. I think it's correct. And also here. So we have a correct formula in here. So let's start with the next one, which is the client name and then client country. Let's me let me just modify this. This should be client name. And on the value, let's replace client ID by client name. And then client country. Make sure to change this to country. Excuse me. Alright, then once you made those changes, it should be good. Now let's test it. I will be using log message this time. So let's look for log message and let's set it to info. And let's just say client details plus client ID plus a dash plus client name plus another dash plus client country. So I will expand the value so you'll see how I set it up. Yep, I think it's correct. Everything is a string. So yep, I think it's good approach that we have a log message. So later in the process we can see what are the details that was extracted. So I think we should be good on this one. Let me just check on the guide. Alright, so once you did that, we can now save this sequence and close it. Now we need to open the process workflow. So let's look for the process workflow. It's in here. You can edit the notation if you would like. So we need to start with this workflow by adding navigate to work item details. So go to system one folder and look for navigate to work item details. And it will require two arguments. And We don't have this argument available because we assigned WID to transaction ID and there's no transaction ID in here. So let's create a new argument inside the process SAML file for process workflow. Let's call it WIID and it should be of type integer, right? And the other one is system1 URL. I think we already have we have a config in here. Do we? Yeah, im config. And let me go to my data and copy this name and make sure to add to string. Let's hit OK for now. Now we need to pass the WIID in here. So let's go to the main and then go inside the process transaction scope. And in the import argument, oh, it's not showing yet. I forgot to save. So once you add the WIID argument, make sure to save it. Then go back to main. Now you can see there's an additional argument in here. Now we can pass the transaction ID. So the transaction ID, we set this variable earlier on the GetTransactionData workflow, if you can still remember. But we have an error because by default, transaction ID is a type of string variable. So we need to convert it into integer so that this bind will get valid. So we can just simply do that by using the cint function in UiPath. So just type in cint and then enclose the variable or transaction ID within the open and close parentheses and hit OK, and you should be good in there. Now let's go back to the process workflow. And now since we have the WIID pass in here, we can now put that in here and hit the OK button. Save it. And the next thing is that we need to invoke extract client information in here, and it has three output arguments, so we need to catch the value of this argument. So we will create new variables and I will just use the same name. You can name it differently if you prepared that. I'm using Control K to create the variable, and once you do that, hit OK, and you should have those three variables in here now. Alright, so what would be the next one? Okay, so the next step is we need to create a sequence that will hash the client information to SHA-1 application. So let's create that new sequence. So let's name the sequence SHA-1 online get hash code and make sure to save that within the SHA-1 online folder. Hit the create button. And from here, we need an input argument and an output argument. So the input argument is the client information. So let's just name it client information. So it's the combination of the ID, name, and country. And then the output argument, let's call it hash result. It should be of out direction, and both of them should be of type string. Okay, so in here, we need to open SHA-1 site manually for the meantime. So grab the SHA-1 URL and open it to your browser. So let's start with attach browser activity with this sequence. And then indicate the SHA-1 page. And let me just validate the selector. It should be good. Now the first thing we need to do here is type into this input box the client information with this format. Later we'll work on this format. But for now, let's look for type into activity and indicate that input box. Now let me validate the selector first. So as you can see here, it's not a good selector. So let's build a better one using UI Explorer. And here we can see there are other arguments or attributes that we can use like the ID, the name, the type as well. I think we can use this tree. Hit the save button. Validate is good. Now let's try to highlight and yep, it's pointing to the right element. Now hit OK. And here let's put the client information if you name the same argument here. Let me just modify the title and make sure to enable simulate type in here. And then after we type here the client information, we need to click the hash button. So let's look for the click activity and click. Let's modify this click hash. Let's indicate it and see it. Now let's validate the selector input. I think we can build a better one than this. Again, let's open UI Explorer. And yep, there is an AA name. There's also, oh, there's no inner text, but it should be okay. So we can just add the AA name, I think. Now hit save. It's validating good. Let's try to validate. And yep, it's pointing to the correct element. Let's hit the OK button. And after that, after you hash a value, it will provide you a hash result and we need to capture this. So for this one, we will be using getText again. So let's look for the getText activity. It's in my recent activity, so I'll just drag that from to here. And again, let's modify this to get hash result. And let's indicate the sample result in here. And make sure again to set wait for ready to complete every time you are using the getText activity. And now let's assign the value to our argument name hash result. Alright, so the last thing we need to do in the SHA-1 application is that since we will be continuously working on this page and we will processing uh, multiple items, every time we hash an item or a client details, we need to click this go back button in here to refresh the page. And to do that, we just need to look for the activity name go back and drag that in here and that will do the job. And again as well, going back to typing the client details or the client information, it's also a good practice to empty field or to activate this property. So make sure to set this to true so that even if there are value in here, it will be emptied by the program first before it type in the new client details. I hope that is clear. And I think now we can test it. So let's put the default value in here. And then let's just put the message box with the hash result. And let me refresh it. I think it's okay. So now let's save it and test it. Run file. It's okay. Let's see if there's a message box. Yes, it's this. Oh, it clicks the go back, so we did not see, but I believe it's good. So let's remove the message box before we forget, and also make sure to remove the default value. It should be blank. Now hit save, save the sequence, and we can now close this one. We can go on to the next step. But before that, we need to add that sequence we just created in here. So to do that, go to your project and then drag that SHA-1 online. And then we need to bind the variable in here. So the client information, this should be the combination of the client details with this format. So make sure to follow the same format as this. What I'm gonna show you, it should be client ID because this is critical part of this exercise, plus dash plus client name plus a dash plus client country. Make sure there is no space before and after the dashes. And then this one, we need to map it to variable. I will just create the same variable name hash result and hit OK. All right, let me just grab a water. And you can also take a break and pause this video, grab a water, and don't get excited yet. Let's just take a quick break. All right, now let's continue. Okay, the next thing is we need to create a new sequence that will update the work items. So to do that, to start with that, we need to create a new sequence, and let's name this one system1 update work item, and make sure to save that within the system1 folder. Hit create. So here we need to start adding two input arguments. So the first one is the comment and the other one is the status. So let's just name it comment, and the next one is status. There should be both in direction and both of string argument type. So let's start with attaching the work item page browser. So we will start with this page. Make sure that you have this page open before you indicate the screen. So let's add the attached browser first and indicate that page. And let's just validate the selector. I think it should be good. And then the next thing is we need to click this update work item. So let's add a click activity. It's on my recent activities. I'll just drag that. Let's modify this title. I can click it, click update work item. And now let's indicate that button. Okay, let's validate the selector first. I think it's good. Yep. Right, now hit OK, and then make sure to enable simulate click as well. And once you click that button, there will be this pop-up window in where we're going to put the comment as well as set the status. So we need to add an activity name type into to work on that window and add that in here. Now let's say type comment. Let's indicate that box. All right. Um, did I close it? Oh, it's here. Right, let's go back, indicate that box. Okay, now let me check the selector. It's not good, so let me open UI Explorer. No, it's not showing me any selector as well. So what we're going to do is indicate the element again from the UI Explorer and indicate this text area or text box. Now we have the selector available. Let's build a better one. Let's select the ID, the name, and the type as well. And I think those three are good. Now validate, and I think that should be fine. Let's save it and let's try to highlight it. And yep, it's pointing to the correct element. Now hit OK. And in the comment, let's put comment and make sure to enable simulate type as well. Right. Well, why does an error in here? Okay, it's good. The next thing is we need to set the status into completed. So we need to use the activity name select. Should be select element or select item, this activity. Now drag it in here and let's identify that drop down. Okay, UiPath does not support it. So what we can do is we can uh, open or edit selector first and open UI Explorer, and let's try to indicate that element again. That's because you can see there's no selector in here. Let's try to indicate the element again. Go in here and then it gives us a button, but what we need is the select tag. So from here just double click select, and now we are on the select element. Let's add other attributes in here like the new status, the class, the name, and yeah, I think that should be good. Now hit the save button. Let's see if it will be validated. Yep, let's try to highlight it, and yes, it's good. Now let's hit OK, and now let's provide the item to be selected. It should be the status. And let's just take an informative screenshot before we end up this activity. So, all right, select status. Okay, so what's next in here is okay, what's next is we need to click this update work item button again. So we'll add a click activity and click up. Okay, click update work item in the pop-up window. Let's indicate that button. And now let's just validate the selector. Again, I hope you're getting familiar now with how to work with selector. It's not validating good, so we need to open UI Explorer. Let's try to indicate the element again. And now it's providing us the element attributes. So let's build a better attribute for this selector. Let's select the AA name as well as the type and the inner text as well. Alright, so once you're done with that, let's try to validate, and it's okay, so hit save. We can also highlight it and it's pointing to the correct element. Hit OK after that. Make sure to simulate click. And the next is what will happen is that after you put a comment in here and select a status like completed and you click this button, there will be a pop-up notification that will appear in here or like an alert. So we need to click this button as well. And to do that, we need to add another click activity. So I'll just drag it here and indicate that button. Alright, so make sure uh, it's able to identify it. If not, you can use F4 or F2, right? But I think F4 is better on this one if you are getting an issue trying to indicate this element. So make sure to indicate the OK button, and then let's try to inspect the selector. And it, I think this one is good. Yep. Alright, so let's try to highlight it and it's pointing to the right element. Let's hit OK after that.
It's a good title. Click push button OK. And once you click this, we also need to click this X button to close this pop-up window. So we need to add another click, and let's indicate that element, right? So again, if you're getting issue trying to identify this button, you can use F4. Hit F4 from your keyboard as you can see here, and then try to indicate this button again. So try to indicate that, and I will try to inspect the selector again. And here, if you have an extra name, so try to remove that and replace with a wild card. It's not that critical, but I think it's a good practice to always do that because that's my name and it's showing in my browser. So if you run it on a different machine, it might fail because they have a different browser plugin name. So after you change that, hit validate and try to highlight that. And I think it's working fine, so I will hit OK. And I think that's all that we need. Once it's closed, it should be fine. And now we can test it. So for the meantime, I will put the default value, sample comment, and status should be completed. Make sure to spell it correctly. And now we can test it. Make sure that you are on this page before you test this file or workflow. So let's try run file. It will click. Oh, the pop-up is black. Okay, wait, let me just make sure that you don't block the pop-up in here. So always allow pop-up in here. So done. Let me try it again. Let me stop this. I just saw that. So let me try it again. Run file. Well, it's a good thing that we saw that because you might experience that problem. Alright, so I think it's getting a problem trying to click this push button OK. And yeah, I know it's an issue and I will not wait for that to show me the error. So I just show it to you guys because I want to show you how to fix that. Let me just click that for the meantime. So what I noticed is that when you click the update button in here, sometimes it has a delay before the notification show up. So what we can do is to add a delay between the click of update work item and the notification. So just look for the delay activity in here. Add that between click update work item and click push button OK. And then let's set it to 4 seconds. I think that's enough time to wait for the notification to show up. But this might not be the best approach for this. What you can do is also to use element exist and make sure that the notification exists before you click it. I think that's the best approach for that. And I leave it to you if you want to test that. But for now, I'll just be using delay with a 4 seconds duration. So now let's try it again. Let me just save this and let's try it again using run file. Now it waits 4 seconds and it was successfully able to complete the task. So make sure, I hope that you follow the all the steps that we put in here. So once you're done with that, make sure to remove the default value that we use and save the sequence. Okay, what's next? We still have other things to do in here. Make sure to close this and now we need to add that sequence in here within the process.xaml. So go to your project and what's the name of that? It's system1 update work item. So drag that in here and there are arguments that we need to bind. So for the comment, this should be the hash result that we captured from SHA-1 application and the status should be completed. Make sure that you spell that correctly or else you'll get an issue with that. Hit OK. And let's just check the guide. What else did we miss in here?
Okay, I think that's all that we need to do. But before I forget, make sure to save the process workflow. Going back to main link, and then in the variables, since we are dealing with data row transaction item in here, we need to start with the zero because again, we're dealing with an array and the counting always start at zero. So we need to replace transaction number with zero from one. So look for transaction number in your variable panel. Again, if it did not show up, just click in here and look for transaction number and then update it to zero. And that should be good. So let me close the process, and before I test it, let's try to analyze the file and validate the project. And let me just grab some water. Okay, as you can see in my error list, there's no error found. I think everything is good. And before we start, before we test it, make sure to save your config file and close it. If you run the if you run the project without closing it, you will get an error. So make sure to close that, and as well the Acme page. Don't just close it. Make sure to log out first. Wait for this page to appear before you close the tab. And now let's also close Shawan Online, and I will close this tab as well. So make sure your desktop is clean, and after that we can test this. I will run it via debug. So if in case there's an error between or within the project, you will be able to it the program will be able to point that directly. So are you excited? I hope you are, and I hope you don't have any error after you validate the project. If there is, make sure to check the previous instruction and step and make sure that everything is set up the way we did it. So if you are ready, now let's try it using debug. Right, let's start opening the System 1 application and log in using the credential we give to it. Now it goes to work item page and extract all the work items from the first page until the last page. Again, you might get 12 pages there, 13 pages or 11 pages because sometimes it depends on the type of data that you get after you reset it. And make sure that before you run this, you have reset all your you have reset the test data. I think I tagged one of my item earlier as completed. So again, before you test it, make sure that you reset the test data. Alright, so I think it was able to navigate into the last page of the work items, and until the last page there are WI5 items. So what I'm expecting is that it will log out from this application and close it and then open it again as well as the SHA one. So let's see. Okay, it's lagging out now. It wait for the login page to show up. Okay, and we got an error. Alright, why did we get an error? It's because object reference not set to an instance. So let me check that. WI list. Let me check transaction data first. It's null. Why it's null? Let me check. Let's stop this for the meantime. It's sad. I thought everything is set up correctly. So let's go to extract work item. Seems like the data captured is not passed correctly. So let me open this workflow and let's validate it. It's DT work items. Oh, we forgot. Or I forgot. Sorry, my mistake. It should be of out direction. Now we save it again. It was in earlier. So now we can again make sure that the out argument or out direction of your DT work items inside the system one extract work item is out so that you'll not get the same error that I got. And then here we need to map it again in the extract work items. Again, we will be mapping it to transaction data variable and hit OK. Alright, I hope you just get the same error as I did and hopefully there's no more in the future. But before I test it again, you can also do the same thing in your side. Make sure to reset your test data. So let me just log in manually in here. Oh, oh no, not work items. Go to user option and reset test data. Okay, now let's log out from this application. Wait for the login page to show up before we close the tab. And now go back to main, save the project, and let's try to debug it again. Or run it by a debug, I mean. Okay, hope it will go smooth right now, and I hope you were able to follow everything that we did. But one thing I can just promise is that we can do it. I did this exercise for so many times. I just trying to explore new approaches. But here I did not add so much on this exercise. Instead, I tried to explain everything in detail and I hope I was able to help you on that, especially if you did not focus so much on the previous course in UiPath, like getting familiar with all the commands and activities. So now it's in the last page. So hopefully we did not will not get the same error after this part. Okay, we're just waiting for the program to log out from this site and I think it's logging out now. And close the application, log out is success. Now it's opening the application again to start processing the item extracted. It's pretty slow. I think it's because I am recording and it consumes some memory. It's making my PC slow, so I hope you're not getting the same. Alright. Okay, so it's another issue. I think I got disconnected to Orchestrator for some reason. So if you encounter the same issue as this, it's an issue like it cannot retrieve your credential from Orchestrator. So if you want to solve it from here, you can just simply provide your username and password. But I hope that did not happen on your side as well. Hit OK and should be able to proceed. Again, that will only occur if you get disconnected with Orchestrator. I'm not sure why did that happen for some reason. And if that thing pop up, just again provide your username and password for the SHA-1 application. And it start processing now the first item. I can see that it was concatenated correctly. Now it's going to the system one again and trying to update the work items. Yep. Now it will be processing the next item. Okay, it's happening. Seems like it's stuck. right? I'm just waiting for the possible error I got. Hmm. What happened to you, bro? Okay, think we got an error. It says cannot find the UI element. Acme System 1 dashboard. Okay, I think there's one thing that we forgot. So every time we update the work item, we should also click this link home link button so that it will go to the dashboard page. All right, I hope this is the last one. So let's stop this for now. And yeah, let me fix what's the error first. So we need to add a new sequence name navigate to dashboard. Let's name it system 1 navigate to dashboard and make sure to save that within the system 1 folder and hit the create button. So make sure that you have the system 1 page open and you are on this page. So let's start with attach browser activity, and let's indicate browser in screen. Let's indicate this page. Let's just validate the selector. I think it's good. Now we add a click activity, and from here we can click this link or this link. I think I prepared this one. So select that and let's validate the selector. I think it's not a good one, so let's open UI Explorer to build a better selector. And you can see here there are better attributes that we can use, like the AA name, the inner text, and yep, I think that's all. I think parent ID should not be part of it. I don't like it. I just don't like it. So try to click highlight and hit OK. And let's try to let's make sure to activate simulate click and save that. So where are we going to add it? We need to open the process.xaml file. So open this process.xaml and then let me close this, navigate to dashboard, and we need to add it at the last part. So look for navigate to dashboard and there's no argument needed in here, so you should be good. Now save it. Now before we test it, I will reset my test data again because there's one item that is already completed. So going back in here, go to user option, reset test data. So every time you encounter an error, make sure to reset your test data so all the items are fresh before you start it again. And now let's log out from this application and wait for this page to appear before you close it. Let's also close the SHA-1 application. And now let's test it. So I will run it again by a debug, but if you're confident, you can just run. But again, the advantage of debug is that if you get an error, it will stop from where that error occur. So that's one advantage of using debug when testing your project. So what are we waiting for? Let's test it now. And I hope that you did not get confused on that part. We just add a sequence that will navigate back to dashboard page, and we just add it on the last part of our process workflow. So now as you can see in here, it was able to retrieve the credential without any problem. So I hope the asking for credential later will not show up again.
Okay.
Well, actually, I have an idea. Maybe it's asking for my credential on the second part of Acme system, maybe because I provide or I map a wrong config value. So later I will check that. But if in case it pop up again, I'll just provide my credential manually. I'm not sure if you noticed that earlier, but I hope you do or you did so that you were able to change that immediately. Right, so now we're on the second part. We're done with extracting work items. Now it's opening application again, and I think my theory is correct. That's why it's taking some time to open the Acme application again. Anyways, oh, oh no, I was not wrong. I did not any mistake on that. It was just I get disconnected really on Orchestrator. That's why. Okay, it's working on the first item now. It's slow. It's making me nervous. I don't want to debug it again. I don't want to fix anything again. I hope it runs smoothly now. And as we can see, it's updating the work item. It wait 4 seconds, then click this OK button. Close that and navigate to dashboard page. I don't want to interfere with it, so let's just let it work. Yep, it's now able to proceed with the second item and should update that item as well. So it's updating it. Mhm. It's working. It's working great so far. So let's just wait for the third item. If it's good, then maybe I'll just fast forward it and just observe your own project. And then I'll just stop the video, or I'll just stop in case I encounter an error with the other items. And I think we're good on this third one. Yeah, I'll just fast forward it, and if in case there's an error, I will stop on that part. Okay, seems like it was able to complete the process successfully, and we did not encounter any error anymore. As you can see, the complete execution took 8 minutes, and just to make sure that it did its job correctly, let me just validate the items. Let's go to Acme system. I hope your project runs smoothly as well on that part. So to validate if it did the job correctly, you need to go to work items and make sure that all the WI5 items in here is tagged as completed. Yeah, go through all the pages and make sure that again all WI5 items is tagged as completed. And here there's no WI5. Yeah, it's completed. All WI5 completed. Just three more pages. hmm And hopefully this last page has WI5. Oh, there's no WI5 in here. Okay, so another thing is you need to check random items in here. Select one WI5 item, go to it and click update work item. Now try to open SHA-1 application and let's try to manually, hash this client value with the right format. It should be dash and dash country. Let's try to hash it and let's try to copy the result and let's compare it to the one that we put in the comment. And if that's the same, you should be good. Right, so I guess we did it. And yep, I hope
you're getting the same thing as I see in my screen, and I hope that your project runs smoothly as it did in my side. So if you have any question with this project, just put that on the comment section of this video. And I hope I was able to provide you everything that you need in order to complete this project. Like not just to build it, but getting familiar with all the part as well, especially in terms of selector, because that's a very important part of this activity. So if I was able to help you, also feel free to donate. I will put my PayPal ID in the description. That's not a joke. If I was able to help you and you are so kind to give some donation, then that's my PayPal ID in the description. And you can also email me at happycodinglife@gmail.com. I will also put that in the description. And yep, hopefully you get a 100% score. So once everything is good, zip file your project and then attach it to UiPath Academy. Wait for the result, and for sure that's a boom. You'll get 100 points and you can proceed to the next exercise. Alright, I hope that's good. So I think that's all for this video, and again, hopefully, and good luck to your UiPath activity and exam. So I guess we should see you. I should see you in the next video and hope again it helps. Thank you for watching this, and again, good luck to you. Bye bye.